The Harley-Davidsons roared to life in perfect synchronization, their engines creating a wall of sound that echoed off the canyon walls as 12 leather-clad bikers surrounded the lone pickup truck on the deserted Nevada highway. The woman behind the wheel appeared to be an easy target, traveling alone on a road known for its isolation, driving a vehicle that looked expensive enough to be worth their time. What the Crimson Serpents Motorcycle Club didn't know was that they had just made the biggest mistake of their criminal careers. Behind the tinted windows sat Ronda Rousey, former UFC bantamweight champion, Olympic bronze medalist in judo, and a woman who had built her reputation on never backing down from a fight. She'd been driving back from a charity event in Las Vegas, taking the scenic route through the desert to clear her head after a long day of media appearances. The last thing she expected was to become the target of a highway robbery, but as she watched the bikers position themselves strategically around her truck, she realized that's exactly what was happening. If you're already feeling the adrenaline pumping, hit that subscribe button and smash the like button, because this confrontation is about to become legendary. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I want to know this story is reaching people who understand that sometimes the wrong person gets targeted by the wrong people at exactly the right time. And don't forget to ring that notification bell, because stories like this prove that real life can be more intense than any movie. The leader of the pack, a massive man with arms covered in serpent tattoos and a beard that reached his chest, pulled his bike directly in front of Ronda's truck and killed the engine. His name was Marcus "Viper" Thompson, and he had been running highway robberies with his crew for over 5 years without ever encountering serious resistance. Tourists and locals alike usually handed over their valuables without a fight when faced with 12 armed bikers in the middle of nowhere. Viper dismounted his Harley with the casual confidence of a predator who had never met his match. He approached the driver's side window, his hand resting on the grip of the pistol tucked into his leather vest. Behind him, his crew spread out in a practiced formation that blocked any possible escape route. They had done this dance dozens of times before, and it always ended the same way, with them driving away richer and their victims left stranded in the desert. "Step out of the vehicle, lady," Viper called out, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to immediate obedience. "This doesn't have to get ugly if you just cooperate." Inside the truck, Ronda felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that had carried her through countless fights in the octagon. But this wasn't a sanctioned competition with rules and referees. This was a real-world situation where the stakes were potentially life and death. She quickly assessed her options. She was outnumbered 12 to 1. They were armed, and she was in the middle of nowhere with no immediate backup available. But Ronda Rousey had never been one to calculate odds when her safety was threatened. She slowly rolled down her window, keeping her hands visible but ready. "Is there a problem, officer?" she asked innocently, her voice betraying none of the tension coiling in her muscles. Viper laughed, a harsh sound that his crew echoed. "Officer? Lady, do we look like cops to you? We're more like tax collectors, and you owe us everything valuable in that truck." "I see," Ronda replied calmly. "And what happens if I refuse to pay these taxes?" The question seemed to amuse Viper even more. "Well, then we'd have to get creative about collection methods. Trust me, you don't want that." What happened next would become the stuff of legend in both MMA circles and law enforcement reports. Ronda opened her door as if to comply, but instead of stepping out submissively, she exploded into action with the speed and precision that had made her one of the most feared fighters in the world. Her first target was Viper himself. Before he could react to her sudden movement, Ronda had grabbed his gun hand and executed a perfect judo throw that sent all 250 pounds of him crashing to the asphalt with bone-jarring force. The pistol skittered away across the road as Viper hit the ground hard enough to knock the wind out of him completely. The other bikers were caught completely off guard. They had expected a terrified woman begging for mercy, not a human weapon who moved with the fluid grace of a trained killer. By the time they realized what was happening, Ronda was already in motion, using her truck as cover while she engaged the nearest threats. The second biker, a wiry man with a mohawk and multiple facial piercings, rushed her with a tire iron raised above his head. Ronda sidestepped his clumsy attack and delivered a devastating uppercut that lifted him off his feet. He was unconscious before he hit the ground, the tire iron clattering harmlessly beside him. "What the hell?" shouted another gang member, finally recognizing that they were dealing with someone far beyond their usual victims. "That's not some random chick, that's Ronda fucking Rousey." The recognition rippled through the remaining bikers like a shockwave. Suddenly, their easy robbery had turned into a confrontation with one of the most dangerous women on the planet. But they were committed now, and retreat would mean losing face in front of their brothers. 3 of them rushed her simultaneously, thinking that numbers would overcome skill. They were catastrophically wrong. Ronda moved like water, flowing between their attacks and striking with surgical precision. Her years of Olympic-level judo training had taught her to use an opponent's momentum against them, and these bikers, strong but untrained, were providing her with plenty of momentum to work with. She threw one into another, creating a tangle of leather and confusion, while simultaneously delivering a knee strike that dropped the third attacker instantly. You're probably wondering how one woman could take on an entire biker gang. Write Ronda in the comments if you believe that proper training and mental toughness can overcome any numerical disadvantage. Viper had managed to get back to his feet, his face purple with rage and embarrassment. He pulled a backup knife from his boot and advanced on Ronda with the desperate fury of a man whose reputation was being destroyed in real time. "I don't care who you are, bitch! Nobody makes a fool of the Crimson Serpents." Ronda turned to face him, her stance relaxed but ready. "You made fools of yourselves the moment you decided to rob someone on this road," she replied coolly. "I'm just helping you realize it." Viper lunged with the knife, but his attack was telegraphed and clumsy compared to the trained fighters Ronda had faced in the octagon. She caught his wrist, twisted it with a technique that made him scream in pain, and relieved him of the weapon in one fluid motion. A perfectly executed hip toss sent him flying through the air again, this time landing him on the hood of his own motorcycle with a crash that dented the gas tank. The remaining bikers were beginning to understand that this was not a fight they could win. Half their crew was already down, groaning on the asphalt or completely unconscious, and their leader had been humiliated twice in less than 5 minutes. But pride and group dynamics kept them from simply riding away, even as their survival instincts screamed at them to flee. 2 more bikers approached from opposite sides, trying to flank her. Ronda had dealt with similar tactics countless times in training, where multiple opponents were used to simulate real-world scenarios. She feinted toward one, drawing his attack, then spun and delivered a devastating elbow strike to the other. The first attacker, overcommitted to his charge, ran straight into a perfectly timed judo throw that sent him tumbling across the asphalt like a rag doll. By now, the smart members of the gang were starting to back away toward their bikes. They had signed up for easy money, not a war with a professional fighter who was systematically dismantling their crew. But their movement caught Ronda's attention, and she realized that if they escaped, they would likely just find other victims to terrorize. "Going somewhere?" she called out, her voice carrying across the desert air with an authority that made them freeze. "We're not done here." What followed was less a fight than a masterclass in combat efficiency. Ronda moved through the remaining bikers like a force of nature, using their own aggression and momentum to defeat them. Her judo background allowed her to throw men twice her size, while her MMA training provided the striking skills to end fights quickly and decisively. One biker tried to start his motorcycle and flee, but Ronda reached him before he could get the engine running. She pulled him off the bike with such force that he landed several feet away, and the unmanned Harley toppled over with a crash of metal and breaking glass. Another attempted to surrender, dropping to his knees with his hands raised, but Ronda wasn't taking any chances. She zip-tied his hands behind his back with restraints she kept in her truck for emergencies, then moved on to secure the others who were still conscious. The entire confrontation had lasted less than 10 minutes, but the desert highway now looked like a battlefield. 12 motorcycles were scattered across the asphalt, some upright, others toppled or damaged. The members of the Crimson Serpents lay groaning in various states of consciousness and injury, their leather vests torn and their pride completely shattered. Viper, who had managed to crawl back to his feet for the third time, stared at Ronda with a mixture of pain, disbelief, and grudging respect. Who the hell are you?" he gasped, apparently having missed his crew member's earlier identification. "I'm someone who doesn't like bullies," Ronda replied, pulling out her phone to call 911. "And I'm someone who really doesn't like being threatened on my way home from a charity event." As she waited for law enforcement to arrive, Ronda kept watch over her defeated attackers while reflecting on the irony of the situation. She had spent the day at an event, raising money for victims of violence, speaking about the importance of standing up to intimidation and never backing down from bullies. Now, less than 6 hours later, she had been forced to put those principles into practice in the most literal way possible. The Nevada Highway Patrol arrived within 20 minutes, followed by ambulances for the more seriously injured bikers. The officers who responded were initially skeptical of Ronda's account until they saw the scene and recognized who she was. 12 armed men defeated by one woman seemed impossible until you factored in that the woman was Ronda Rousey. "Ma'am, are you injured?" asked Sergeant Martinez, the senior officer on scene. "Not a scratch," Ronda replied, though her knuckles were slightly scraped from the encounters. "But I think some of them are going to need medical attention." The investigation that followed revealed that the Crimson Serpents had been responsible for dozens of highway robberies over the past several years. They had targeted isolated travelers, particularly women driving alone, using their numbers and intimidation tactics to avoid serious resistance. Their victims had included tourists, local residents, and even some off-duty law enforcement officers who had been caught off guard. Viper Thompson, it turned out, had an extensive criminal record, including armed robbery, assault, and weapons charges. Several of his crew members were wanted on outstanding warrants in multiple states. What they had intended to be just another easy score had instead resulted in the dismantling of their entire operation. The legal proceedings were swift and decisive. Faced with overwhelming evidence and multiple witnesses, including dashboard camera footage from Ronda's truck that had captured the entire encounter, most of the gang members pled guilty to various charges. Viper himself received a sentence of 15 years in federal prison, while his associates received terms ranging from 5 to 10 years. But the story didn't end with the convictions. Ronda's encounter with the Crimson Serpents became a catalyst for broader discussions about highway safety and the vulnerability of solo travelers, particularly women on remote roads. Her experience highlighted the need for better emergency communication systems and increased patrols in isolated areas. More importantly, it demonstrated the value of self-defense training and the confidence that comes from knowing you can protect yourself. Ronda began incorporating her highway encounter into her motivational speaking, using it as an example of how preparation and mental toughness can overcome seemingly impossible odds. The incident also had an unexpected impact on the Crimson Serpents themselves. Several of the gang members, particularly the younger ones, used their time in prison to reflect on their choices and eventually turn their lives around. One of them, a 22-year-old named Jake, who had been knocked unconscious in the first minute of the fight, later wrote to Ronda from prison, thanking her for stopping him before he went too far down a criminal path. "I thought I was tough," he wrote. "I thought being in a gang made me powerful. But you showed me what real strength looks like." It's not about intimidating people weaker than you. It's about protecting people who can't protect themselves. Ronda kept the letter, along with several others from former gang members who had used the encounter as a wake-up call to change their lives. It reminded her that sometimes the most important victories aren't the ones that happen in the octagon or on the Olympic mat. They're the ones that happen on a lonely highway when someone refuses to be a victim. The Nevada Department of Transportation eventually installed additional emergency call boxes along the stretch of highway where the encounter occurred, partly in response to Ronda's advocacy for improved traveler safety. A small plaque near one of the call boxes reads, "In memory of all travelers who have faced danger on this road and in honor of those who refuse to be victims." Ronda still drives that route occasionally, though she now travels with additional security measures and maintains constant communication with her team. The desert highway holds no fear for her. If anything, it serves as a reminder of her own capabilities and the importance of never backing down when faced with injustice. The story of her encounter with the Crimson Serpents has become part of MMA folklore, retold in gyms and training facilities around the world as an example of how martial arts skills can translate to real-world situations. But for Ronda, it represents something more personal, proof that the values she learned in judo and MMA extend far beyond competition. "People ask me if I was scared," she said in a later interview. "Of course I was scared, but being scared doesn't mean being helpless. It means being alert, being ready, and being willing to do whatever it takes to protect yourself and others." Today, the stretch of Nevada highway where the confrontation occurred is much safer, thanks in part to increased law enforcement presence and improved emergency systems. The Crimson Serpents Motorcycle Club has been permanently disbanded, its members either in prison or having moved on to legitimate lives. And somewhere in the desert, tire marks and oil stains still mark the spot where 12 armed men learned that sometimes the person you choose to victimize is exactly the wrong person to mess with. What do you think about Ronda's split-second decision to fight rather than comply? Have you ever found yourself in a situation where your training or instincts took over in a moment of danger? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I love hearing about real-world examples of courage and preparation paying off when it matters most. If this story inspired you, share it with someone who needs a reminder that we all have more strength than we realize, and that sometimes standing up to bullies is the only way to stop them from hurting others.